NGHIEM'S Fairytales. NGHIEM's Fairytales. With James Nim.
Okay, it is March 6th, a lovely Saturday here on the patio at the Speakeasy. Most people are vaccinated, or most people within 6 feet of me are vaccinated. I'm not, but I've also been a hermit, so we're just going to roll the dice on this. This is NIM's Fairy Tales. If you have been listening, it's a periodic pandemic podcast, not monthly, not weekly, just periodic. The theme of our shows as of late has been I used to be, and today we're talking about I used to be in a cult.
Yeah, I used to be a cult member.
Used to be a cult member. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into it kind of slow. But our guest today is my good friend, Wayne Scott. Not that good of friends, but good enough. Wayne Scott. He's a really cool dude. Tarot card reader, performer. Used to be in a cult. How's it going, Lane?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. Just been living this pandemic life. Socially distancing a lot, and just kind of trying to do the family thing right now. Been writing a lot, getting artistic that way, and just trying to see, what's life gonna be.
Yeah. What has been the most difficult thing about the pandemic for you?
I think it's probably just like connections, right? Like connecting with people and trying to keep those connections up, because I've always been more of like an introvert anyways. So at the beginning of the pandemic, it was like, this is awesome, this is every introvert's dream. And then I was like, this isn't so awesome. We're a few months in. So just kind of learning different ways to connect with people and reach out, and it's been interesting. It's really kind of been a journey of finding myself a different kind of voice, really.
Yeah, I think I was kind of the same way at the beginning. Just like, oh yeah, I could just watch anime and get in shape. And then during the middle of it, I think actually this podcast was kind of born out of me just being like, I need to talk to somebody at least this today. So I called up my friend Brad to do a podcast. I had to make up a reason to talk to people. So the first 3 episodes of this is just me making up a reason to meet people for brief periods of time to have a human conversation.
Right on, dude.
Thank you for reaching out.
Yeah.
Have you been listening to the show? I know you actually reached out for me with this story.
Yeah. I listened to the first one with Brad, and I listened to the one with was Matt is his name or something? The football player guy?
Oh, Trent, yeah.
Trent, sorry. Yeah. I listened to that. So, yeah, I've been listening.
Okay.
Really been enjoying it. It's kind of neat, I like the concept, just, hearing different people's stories.
Yeah, I think unofficially this is the oral history of Oklahoma City to me. So I just go around humans of Oklahoma City, very human stories of things they used to be. So you used to be in a cult. So what's up with that?
Yeah. So kind of, weird. It was later in life, which is not the normal story for people that kind of get into that thing. Growing up, I grew up just in a, I don't know, I guess you'd consider it kind of a Christian household. We went to church and stuff. My parents got divorced when I was 7, and then kind of didn't go to church so much. And then, 16, 17, I got involved in a church again. And at that time, it wasn't the cult church. It was just a Pentecostal church, very charismatic. And it was just something to do, I had a lot of friends in college.
Yeah, let me pause real quick, because when I went to prom in high school, I went to prom with a girl who was in a Pentecostal church, and I remember people around school being like, Pentecostals are fucking weird.
Yeah.
And I'm not Christian at all, so I didn't know the difference. I just thought she was cool.
Yeah.
So what makes a Pentecostal church a Pentecostal church? What's the difference?
So the main difference is, they believe in, it's very charismatic. So they believe in speaking in tongues, which is, everyone has a different interpretation of that, but some will say it's this direct language with God, which I believed at one time that's a whole nother thing.
I like that you think that speaking in tongues is charismatic. I don't, it's off-putting to me, but oh man, that guy's really charismatic. He's speaking in tongues in the alley.
or from a charismatic perspective, it's a lot of dancing, like when you go in and you consider like a more traditional church. So let's say comparing to like, I don't know, like Catholic church, it's very traditional. They have a lot of, you know, different traditions that you're going to follow. Every time you go, it's going to be the same. When you go to a Pentecostal church, you never know what to expect. It's going to be like one time it might be a very calm service. The next time people are screaming and crying and, all of this crazy stuff's going on. And you really, the first time you go, you don't know what it is. And that was my first experience with it when I was 16. Like I went for the first time because a friend invited me, and I was like, what is this, And it intrigued me, and I kind of started going there. And that was when I first got introduced really to that type of religion. But again, that wasn't the cult church. And so I was there for quite a while. And then after that, kind of just got older and grew away from those people, right? I went on to college, did different things, got out of that. And when I started actually getting back involved in church, I was looking for something similar. And I had a friend who invited me and was like, hey, you should check this out. I know you went to a Pentecostal church before. So I went, and the first time I went, I was like, okay, this is what I'm looking for, Like, it was everything I expected. Like, you walk in and everyone's super friendly, It's like that traditional, like, just makes you want to feel good place. And it was what I, had been searching for a while. I'd kind of found myself in a place where it was like spiritually I was down. I'd gotten kind of away from like any kind of spiritual practice whatsoever. And so I was just looking for something to like mean more in my life.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, maybe this is going to be it.
So when you went to church originally, why did you start going, like in high school? Why did you start going again? And then why did you leave? Just like,
so it was just social, right? It was just social whenever I was like in 16 high school. There were a lot of friends. I was in a small town, and that's what people did. We went to church, and
what town was it? What population? Let's just say.
Oh no, it was El Reno. Like
Okay.
I'm totally down with saying where it's at. Yeah, it was El Reno. So there you did one of two things. Like in El Reno, you did drugs or you did Jesus. So I was Jesus.
They're mutually exclusive. You either pick
Right.
drugs or Jesus. It's not like Oklahoma City where you can mix and match, but
right. Totally different. So, yeah. But yeah, for like, when I got reintroduced, it was, like I said, right away, it was a place that I thought that was going to match what I was looking for. Because I just was really looking for a place that I could like feel those feelings that I felt a few times in my life, where I felt like I was connecting with like a higher power or whatever.
yeah.
And it was really interesting the way that they brought me in, right? So I have always been into performance arts, specifically music. I play piano, I sing.
So we're talking about the cult now.
The cult now.
Okay, so we skipped ahead. We're back in the cult. So
Yeah.
you found this thing in high school that you're missing in college. You're
Yeah.
trying to reconnect with this like hopefulness and optimism and
Right.
like sense of place.
Yeah, sense of place, really, right? Because even though it was very social in high school, there were those moments where it was like, okay, there's something else here. And so I was like, I want to find that connection again. And so I go and, I'm like, okay, this is awesome. Like, it's kind of the same thing that it was, in the other church that I'd gone to. And then they, started asking me like to be more involved in things because they knew that I performed. Like the year before that, I'd actually tried out for American Idol, and a few of them recognized me from TV. And so
Were you on TV for American Idol?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's season 9. So
So look that up on YouTube. Actually, when I post this episode of this podcast, I'll tag you as like American Idol contestant Wayne Scott.
all right. Yeah, that's funny. The funny part is there were some dudes from the church, the cult church, that knew me in high school, and that's kind of how I connected to them there.
Okay,
But-
so this is just like where the people from church in high school graduated to go. Like they graduated from that church to go to this cult.
Like a few people did. There like 3. There was 3 of us that went over there.
Okay.
But the funny part about it was the American Idol thing was because their thing that they would every time they'd see me be like, this dude was on American Idol, and I'd be like, oh god, So like that was my introduction every time we went anywhere. So
Maybe I won't post that. I'm sorry.
no, it's totally fine. But So, I went in and I decided, okay, like I'm gonna give this a try, whatever. I started getting involved a little bit, right? So like, um, I started, doing some music ministry there. Started playing the piano a little bit. Started singing. Got involved in what they call like their praise band, which is essentially like, the people that sing on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
Those type of things. And I'm sure that I probably noticed some things along the way that were a little off.
Yeah. Okay. So like my next question is like, so when did you like? What were some dead like red flags that started to show up? They're like, what are the differences between this church and this cult and the other churches you went to?
So big difference is like appearance, right? So at this church, the one that I grew up in, that was not, a cult. Like you could wear whatever you wanted. It was real laid back in that sense. This church, like, if you were a part of the church, like the men were expected to wear very dressed up clothes. You weren't going in without a jacket.
Yeah.
Women were wearing dresses to the floor. They couldn't cut their hair. Men couldn't have facial hair.
Yeah.
Even though that's like totally against the Bible. But like their thing was, if you had facial hair, you were trying to be like a rock star in the '60s, right? And you were being rebellious if you had facial hair. So couldn't have that.
I gotta pause real quick. I got this weird thing about religion. This is gonna sound really sacrilegious to me, but like just watching people argue about like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like let's say like the first 3 Star Wars movies, like the Old Testament or whatever. It's like whatever. And then all this branching past like prequel, like some people like those, like that direction, and some people like the Disney direction. And I feel like sometimes, those 2 people argue, like those like groups, but everybody agrees that the first 3 movies are the shit. And then all the other past, like this Mandalorian shit that's going on, some people like that better. And I feel like it's like branching away into the holy wars around Star Wars. I feel like that's the same way like religion kind of starts with like a core idea that everybody can get down with. And then eventually somebody goes in a direction, they're like, nope, no facial hair, and girls gotta have long hair. I don't know.
Yeah, dude. Like it's totally is that, and like the history of the church is that in a way. Like they were originally part of a bigger organization and broke off because there were a couple of dudes that were like, we want this to be more conservative and we want it to be more holy, whatever, that meant to them.
Yeah.
And apparently that meant like women can't cut their hair or wear makeup and dudes need to like wear long pants to go swimming, which was always awkward, right? So, those were some initial red flags, right? But I would ask questions and be like, like, help me understand this, because like I consider myself an intelligent person. I'm educated.
Yeah.
So I would ask questions and they would show me like different scriptures and I'd be like, okay, I can kind of see that, right?
Yeah.
And they were minor things at that point, right? So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, if they're okay with this, like, I'm all right with this. Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
So I just
So-
kind of kept going.
So you put up with it, even though
Yeah.
you didn't like totally agree with it.
Yeah, right. Like I was like, I can be okay with this if this is what God wants, right? So
Yeah.
like then the other part to it is like, they always leave you with like, you really need to pray about this. You really need to seek God's face, and then they follow up with you, right? So it's not just like they leave you with that question.
Yeah.
They follow up with you like multiple phone calls from multiple people in the church.
Hey Lane, did God talk to you yet?
Yeah.
What did he say? Did he say
Exactly.
what we wanted him to say?
Yeah, like, so have you got a revelation yet? Like that they would always check in with you. Like, I'm praying for you. Like, I'm hoping God puts this on your heart. Like, and once He does, you're gonna feel so much better. You constantly, it was that kind of a thing. Like, and so then you're in this place where it's like, well, if I'm not feeling this, am I really as close to God as they are? Because like they look like they got it together, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they've got like the pastor drives like, this nice Mercedes Benz and he lives in like, $500,000 home and he's got everything. Like, I could have all those things if I could just be like obedient and not be rebellious.
Oh yeah. So like, if you follow God, you'll get all this material wealth. Kind
Right,
of thing.
right, dude. So it's like, and not just material wealth, but like because of the persona that they put on, it's like you don't know what their personal problems are, right? So you see them like have their whole families in the church and everything's happy and all of that. And then you find out, once you leave and you're gone and some of their families left too, and you have those conversations later, like everything wasn't as happy as you thought.
Yeah.
But that's what you were going for. Like you wanted that happiness, right?
Okay, so we talked about like that kind of like a superficial red flag, even
Yeah.
though like it's like uncomfortable. It's like you could put up with that.
Yeah.
But so what were some other ones that like kind of hit it over the head where you're like, oh, I gotta leave this place?
Yeah. So I'll talk about why I eventually left in a minute, but like the bigger red flags that started making me ask bigger questions was, so the pastor owned a few rental properties, and he would only place women in those rental properties who were single,
Okay.
with who had children, and there were a lot of stories that were just going around about like the fact that, you know, he was really lording over their lives and like telling them exactly what they could do, what they couldn't do, how they could live, how they couldn't live, would show up at their house random times of the day, you know, like
Yeah.
it just kind of creepy stuff, you know, like I don't know, David Koresh type stuff, you know, and it's like, what's going on here? Well, you know, I can't ever say like I didn't experience him doing anything like that. I would consider to be, you know, not treating women unfairly or anything like that. But he took advantage of their mind, right?
Yeah.
And put them in a place where I started to see like they would be trapped, and he would be charging them ridiculous amounts of money for these little tiny houses.
Yeah.
You know, they would try to get themselves back on their feet, and he would get them in there and start them off with like, okay, I'm going to give you like, you can live here for this amount of time with no rent or low rent or whatever.
Yeah.
And then after this amount of time, then you're going to start paying this thing. But then it would turn into a situation where they couldn't leave, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
then they were part of this organization in this church, and like when they started to leave, then all the women in the church would come and be like, but do you really want to leave? Because like you're leaving God behind. You're not just leaving this house behind, like you're stepping away. And you know, so for me, I've always been really close to the women in my life, right? So I think if I was just like maybe not as close as I was as some of the men were, like, you know, to the male figures, it may have been different for me, because I really care about, you know, women's rights and like them being empowered in those things. And so seeing these women being in a place where like they had absolutely no power to do anything.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they had to, and it was preached even in the church, like, you know, you will do what your husband says when he says to do it. You know, it doesn't matter what it is. And even to the point of, you know, let's just be real, like to the point of rape. Like if your husband says that you're going to do this, you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't okay with that.
So, so you heard those stories, and like that's not like just like something that like you're kind of like. So you talked to your friends who were in the church about it.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Man.
So, you know, it's like I know at least three people who have left the church.
And their husbands probably.
And their husbands totally took advantage of the
Yeah.
situation. Yeah.
That's tough, man.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna switch topics unless you have any anything else to add to this.
No, go ahead.
I know, like in your previous email, you said you're LGBTQ.
Yep.
And that kind of like made you feel like farther from God, in a sense that like so you felt like you had to be a part of this church to get closer to Him. Did they ever like hold that over your head, or did they even know, or like?
Yeah. So that's a great question. You know, there were a couple of people in the church that knew. It wasn't something that like I could have never openly discussed it, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was, you know, like I thought if I really devoted myself to this church and I did everything I was supposed to do, like God was going to take this part of me away, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because like this wasn't, you know, the right thing, you know, and that's essentially what they taught, you know. And so I just always was like hoping for the 6 years that I was there, you know, like, okay, God, like if this is not the way I'm supposed to feel, like you're just going to take this away one day. And it never went away, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it wasn't going to go away. And
I think that's a hard ask.
yeah, exactly, right? Like, you know, I don't know. And I can remember like there was one particular person in the church that I kind of had shared things with and confided in, and they knew how much, like I said, music meant to me. And there was one of the praise and worship songs that we had there, and it was called "Mold Me in Your Image." And they would just like harp on that, and they'd be like, you know, like all you got to do is just pray and sing that, and just ask God to mold you in His image, and He's going to be able to change that. And I'm like, if you only knew how many times I said God mold me, you know, like. But apparently I wasn't that good of clay because it didn't work.
He was just too busy then.
Yeah,
I was like,
right.
just keep being gay for a second. I got like plagues and whatever.
Right, right.
Or he just didn't care. Maybe he's like, if God exists, maybe he doesn't care that you're gay.
Yeah, I go with he doesn't care, you
Yeah.
know. Now that I'm out and I see things in a totally different light, like, for me, I mean, that's what it is, you know, and my perspective now, I guess, like, I could share that is I just believe, like, everybody should believe whatever they want to, right? I think that my truth is different than your truth, and everyone's truth is the perfect truth. And that's really what I live by. Like, whereas before, it really hurts me to look back and think, like, how many times I tried to push my truth on other people.
Yeah.
You know, and that I think is the place where I still hold guilt from getting myself caught up in that space and that place, you know, because I hurt people while I was there.
Yeah.
And that's not something
Like you're,
that I can let go of, you know.
Who did you hurt while you were there? Like,
Oh.
like people in the church or like people in
Yeah,
your life?
people in the church, people in my life. I mean, I cut out every person, including my family, while I was in the church. So, like, it was funny because I was talking to my mom, and I was talking to a couple of my friends before I came and told them I was going to be doing the podcast, and they're like, yeah, I wish I could sit in on that and say a few things. And I was like, you know, well, what would you say? And my mom was like, I would just tell them, like, how crazy it was that you were, like, totally so far into it so quickly and, like, just totally a different person over, you know, a short period of time.
Yeah.
And there was no talking to me, you know. They got to the point where, you know, they would say, like, if you really want to be close to God, then you have to be willing. Like, there's some verses in the Bible that refer to, like, cutting off your own hand, right?
Yeah.
If it's making you sin. And so, like, they would say, like, you need to cut off your family because they're not part of the church, so they're keeping you away. So I stopped going to family, like, Christmas. I stopped going to family, you know, anything that had to do with that. I stopped seeing friends. When I was in the church, like, it ended up turning into, and this is where it got for me, you know, where it became the cult church, was that I was there 7 days a week.
Yeah. I'd like, I don't know a lot about cults, but one of the things I've heard repeatedly from people who've, like, either have had experiences like yours or, like, people who are just, like, really into the topic, who read a lot of stuff, is, like, a classic cult technique is, like, cutting you off from people who care about you, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that really that's really, you know, what they do. They cut you off, and then they replace, and they'll tell you, like, you don't need your family because we're your family, you know, like, we're going to always be there for you. You don't have to worry about that. And I can remember the very first Christmas still, because my family, we get together, there's like 50 of us that get together as a family, and I didn't go that year. And I can remember the pastor coming to me and be like, you don't have to worry because I'm going to be like your dad, and I'm going to, you know, and his wife was like, we love you like you're our kid. And I'm like, okay, you know.
I mean, I just, to me, it's just like, there's no, like, somebody could say that to me, but
Right.
there's no way you can mean that. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they don't even know what they mean, because you've never met my mom, you never met my dad, and you haven't
Yeah.
been with me through all this. And, like, I can beef with my mom and my dad. I still beef with my mom to this day. And but, like, I don't know. You need people in your life you can do that with, and I don't
Yeah.
know. But for somebody to just, like, show up and say they're gonna be this everything for you and, like, everything's gonna be great, I think that's a red flag, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, but when you're in, you don't see that red flag, right? At that point, I was so devoted to it that it was like, okay, now it's just a matter of, like, they're embracing me. That was them embracing me into their family.
Yeah.
So for me, that was them showing me love, really.
Yeah. What other things did you notice that were, like, kind of toxic? Or if you want to go to, like, skip to the point of, like, when you decided to leave, I'm cool with that too.
Yeah, so, you know, other things that were just toxic were just, you know, the amount of control that they wanted to have over you, and in every single facet of your life. I mean, from the way you spent your time, you know, to how you spent your money. If you were involved in the church and involved from a ministry perspective, then, like, you were required to show them how much money you were making so they could make sure that you were giving the right amount of money to the church.
Jesus.
And if you weren't giving the right amount of money to the church, then there was a problem, and then, like, you'd get docked later. I mean, there was this whole process, and, like, one time I accidentally did not give the amount of money that I was supposed to give, and like got reprimanded essentially. So like I was put on what they call suspension for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 services, which just essentially meant I couldn't like perform on the stage with the praise band or whatever,
Oh
right?
shit! It's like classic Hollywood pay to play. It's a pay
Yeah.
to play open mic.
Yeah, right. So I didn't pay, so I didn't play, and so that kind of leads into like why I left, was because it just got more and more like that, like where they were controlling things, and they started really getting involved in my personal life. There would be cars showing up where I was working at to make sure that I was where I was supposed to be, because towards the end they did have suspicion about a relationship that I might have been in.
With like a dude or whatever.
Yeah.
With a dude.
And
with a dude.
with a dude. And so they started following me. They would, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, I would look out and there'd be cars on the street that I knew who these people were, and it's like you would ask them like, were you in my neighborhood last night? Like they're totally act like they were not there, but it's like, I've got a picture of your car, like
Yeah.
it was just crazy, and you would think that that would have been enough, right? But then still within this guilt game that they played, it was like, well, they're just looking out for me, right? So that didn't make me really leave. It is really kind of stupid. The final thing that broke the camel's back was, so they have this thing called, well, they have conference each year, which is like this big general conference that you go to, that the whole organization, there's hundreds of thousands of people go to. And then they have the state conference. And we were going to have state conference, and I was supposed to lead worship there. And the church that I belong to within the organization was... funny to say it now, but they were more liberal than the rest of the churches were. And so that like they would allow you to have facial hair, right? And I didn't even know that was ever a thing, right? Like I'd been in this church for like 6 years, never really realized, I guess, when I went to the other place, like no one had facial hair. But they had started, like I said, trying to control, like asking me tons of questions. Like they would take my phone and go through it. They would, want to know, like, why was I at work an extra 45 minutes one day? I'm like, how do you even know I was at work
So
an extra
you have
45
like no
minutes?
autonomy, I guess.
None, absolutely not. And so essentially, it comes down to, we're having this service. It's out at these. It's almost like a fairgrounds place that they have it at, and way far out in the country. And essentially, it was like the night before we were gonna have the bigger service where I was supposed to perform, and the pastor came up to me and he's like, before tomorrow, and he points to my face and he's like, I need all of that gone. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, your facial hair, and like he goes into this explanation about the fact that like it's rebellious because of the 60s, and like, am I trying to be like a stoner, all this crazy shit, right? And I'm like, okay, and I'm taken off guard by it. I think he was just like joking at that point, right? Like, so I didn't say anything. And then like I get 2 or 3 text messages that night that's like, you need to wear this, like gave me exact outfits that I needed to wear, like make sure that facial hair is off of your face, all of that. And like I sat down that night and I just started like going through things, and the person that I was in a relationship with at that time was like, could tell something was off, because like, mind you, they were not going to the church, right? This entire time. So it was really awkward for them, right? Because here I am, like totally involved in this thing.
If I was dating somebody that was in a cult and they're telling me all this stuff, I'd be pretty concerned.
Yeah, and they were concerned, right? And they brought up concerns multiple times, but like I was just like, well, it's because you don't like believe what I believe, and that's okay, but like I'm right and you're wrong.
Get out of this cult.
Yeah, exactly. So and a couple of times like that relationship almost ended throughout the process, but it didn't, and I'm thankful for that. And so anyways, that particular evening, he was just like, what's bothering you? What's going on? And I kind of just like was telling him like, look, like I've been followed for the last month, like this is going on. And like then they started asking questions about like, well, was it this vehicle and this vehicle? And so they'd been following that person
Oh,
too,
Jesus,
you know?
you brought a cult,
And so,
cult security team into this person's life.
yeah. And so like at that point, it was like, okay, like this is really getting serious to the point that like, it's not just involving me or could be harmful to me, but like it could be harmful to this other person who's being followed.
So that's
and-
what kind of like made you like, okay, so it's not just my life anymore. I
Yeah.
gotta protect my
Yeah,
friends.
exactly. Like it's not just me anymore. And you know, so I ended up going the next day and talking to the pastor and being like, the first thing he says when he sees me is like, I thought I told you, like all that needs to be gone. And he points at my face and I was like, well, I've got something to tell you. I was like, all.
I was hoping you would say, I got confused. I actually shaved my nut hair and then you pulled down your pants. I told him to suck your dick.
You know, that would have been great. That would have been great. But no, I was just like, you know, like, you know, I pointed to my face. I was like, you don't have to worry about all of this anymore. And then I pointed to my whole self and I'm like, because all of this is gone. Like, I'm totally gone. And I walked out, you know, and I would like to say that was the last time I ever went, but it wasn't. I guilted back in, and I, you know, I talk about it like it's some type of an addiction, but I say I relapsed because it really was that. Probably like 7 times. So that was 2014, and the last time I went to the church ever, for any period of time longer than I would say like a 2 or 3 services was in 2017.
Okay, so that's not that long ago. I
Yeah.
mean, it's still like an Olympic, the span of an Olympics.
Yeah, yeah,
Or a presidential term.
yeah, but not a terribly long time. No.
Yeah. How long have I known you?
You know, I was thinking about that, and I'm thinking like it was probably right around right after that time. Like,
So I met you right after you got out of the
yeah,
cult.
yeah, and like it's weird because I was thinking, I was like, you know, like James and I haven't ever had like any real intense conversations, but you know, a lot of it was because like when I first met you, I was like in this real awkward space of like I didn't have conversations with people because I just was afraid of getting close to anyone because I'm like, oh shit, what if they're like some cyber cult that's like hidden,
Yeah.
you know, they're gonna draw me
Like
in.
I'm part of the cult. Like,
Like anybody could be, you know, like or a different cult or something, you know, like I don't know. It put me in this really weird headspace where I just didn't get close to anyone.
Yeah. I mean, understandably so. I think like once you like let yourself get that vulnerable and then you're getting taken advantage of that
Yeah.
degree, I think it would be kind of hard for me, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of like when you got guilted back in, did you guilt yourself back into going, or did somebody like
So
a swarm of women just like, hey, you can't leave, just like
no, so it wasn't a swarm of women. So that's the thing about the church. Like men could only talk to men, and women could only talk to women. So it was the men in the church who were the friends, right, that had originally brought me in.
yeah,
So they would reach out to me and be like, hey man, how you doing? You know, like, and I told them like I'm totally not interested in talking to you. Like I don't want to be a part of the church anymore. I care about you as a person, you know, and I still do care about them and wanted to help them even like realize like how crazy that it was.
Yeah.
But I've realized that's a lost cause. But they would reach out and just be like, you know, I've been praying for you, or they'd be like, God put this on my heart. And it'd be at weird places in my life, like where I don't know, something shitty had happened to me that day, and I'd be like, oh God, maybe this is God, like talking
so you're
through
like taking
them.
it as a sign.
Yeah, right. Because like I had known like in the Pentecostal church that this was like all signs and wonders. And I you know, and I want to say this, like I don't want this to be like all Pentecostal churches because it's not. There's a specific organization, and
I don't think we've named them.
we haven't, but I don't mind naming them.
I mean,
so it's
I don't care either. I didn't know if it was a thing. You
No,
didn't want to
so
get
it's-
harassment.
It's UPC, United Pentecostal Church International. There's lots of YouTube. There's actually a lady who does stories only about people who have left the church. So something interesting to look into later.
I think like when you originally came to me with this story, I think this was like December when you emailed me.
Yeah, yeah.
It was, you said something about them being like an FBI watch list or something. Like
Yeah, so they were on the FBI watch list for a long time. I'm not sure if they still are. I know they were when I got out. Because my family had come to me a few times and were like, you realize they're on a watch list? And I'm like, that's bull, you know, like you're full of it, you're making this up. And then I like looked into it after I got out. I'm like, they weren't full of it. I was really crazy, like, you know. And so I don't know, you know, and then that's the harder part is like realizing like how easy it was to have gotten so far deep into something that was just totally crazy.
Yeah. You seem pretty well adjusted and normal, so I don't like, I don't like it's kind of off-putting to me because I'm just like, if you're susceptible, then I think it's like everybody's susceptible
Yeah.
to a point, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think it's just you being careful of, I don't know, being careful of your surroundings, and like not losing yourself. I think that's really what it boils down to. And I think what I've learned for myself is like journaling is the biggest tool for me in being able to like do a lot of self-reflection. So like now today, I consider myself spiritual. Probably the closest thing I would consider to like, and I don't even consider like Buddhism a religion, it's an ideology, but like that's more of like the path that I'm on now. And it's just really, about finding your inner self and those inner places of peace and healing and being the best person you can be for the people around you.
That's beautiful. I've been reading a lot of Buddhism books today. It's definitely a religion on my side of the family, but like I'm not super religious, so I kind of just take what I need from it.
Yeah.
Can I read? Doesn't have anything to do with this story, but can I read you a quote from this?
Yeah, for sure.
This like Buddhist book that I was reading today. About I think it's a monk, but this is the most superhero shit that I've heard anybody in real life ever say, and it's like, this is why like it's a religion to me. Like,
Yeah.
but this is like crazy to me currently. But this is the prayer: for as long as space exists and sentient beings endure, may I too remain to dispel the misery of this world.
Yeah, that's deep, right? Like, I
Sorry for the segue. That doesn't
No,
have anything
no,
to do
dude,
with this cult.
I love that because it's like that really is kind of like the path that I'm on now, right? It's like I went from a place where it was like for all of my days I'm gonna try to lead people to this like one place of salvation, right?
Yeah.
To where now it's like for all of my days all I want to do is be the best kind-souled person, friend, ally that I can be to any person, no matter what your background is. Because whatever religion you believe in or you don't believe in, which is absolutely fine, it all comes down to just like loving one another, accepting one another. And I hate some of the I'm very liberal right now, whereas before I would consider myself very conservative, which was weird for
I
like
think when
a gay
I
man.
talked to you, you were conservative. Like the first time I ever talked
Yeah.
to you, you were talking to me about the election, and I was like, "What the fuck?" And
Yeah.
I was like, kind of mad at you, honestly.
Yeah, so like I go from this very conservative place, but what I would say is from looking kind of like balancing the two sides is for me it's really just not just tolerance, right? I don't think tolerance is what we need. We need people to be allies to other people.
Like acceptance.
Yes, acceptance, right. So that's really what changed in my mindset, and where the light started flipping on was like, okay, like you have backed away from every person that you love, you care about, and all those things. So how do you right those wrongs? And so for me, it's just like doing my best now with having the sight, right? 2020 hindsight, to be able to just be the best person that I can be to every person I come in contact with.
Yeah, that's solid. I'm gonna go back a little bit.
Yeah.
So you were talking about your friends who brought you into the church.
Yeah.
And how they kept trying to get you back in. So my question is, you had said all these people were like following you, like because of this relationship you were in.
Yeah.
And did your friends know about you before they brought you in?
So I think one of them suspected. Didn't know for sure. Neither one of them did. No.
Okay. My next question would be like, if they did know, like, were they cool with everybody just like coming down on you like this, like all these people and this, like, so
Well,
were they closer to the church than you at this point?
Well, they were probably closer to the church, and for them, and this is where I have to show love back to them, even though it's hard to do. Is like, even in the space they're in now, is like, for all they were doing was trying to love me in their mind, right?
Yeah.
Because they are in a mindset that if they can get me
That's
to
so,
believe,
That's so fucked up, though. Like, don't like that's
Well,
they're
is.
tricking themselves at that point.
yeah. But I mean, I know how deep I was, right? And they were even deeper than I was in.
Yeah.
So like, that's really what it was, them trying to love me in a sense.
Yeah. That's stupid. I'm gonna just say
No,
that.
it's fine, dude.
I just think that's so fucked up. That's like such a way to rationalize your shittiness.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's like this guy says I'm right, so like my fucked up actions are justified now to an
Yeah.
extent or whatever. I don't know. You could say anything at that point. They could like punch you in the face and be like, God told me to punch you in the face.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, take all your money, or
God told me to rape my wife.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm not mean to like nervously laugh after I said that. Just like it's really upsetting to me. Is all.
No. I mean, I feel the same way. It's crazy.
Okay, so NGHIEM'S Fairy Tales always has a moral at the end of our stories, and I guess the moral of this story is don't join. Say it again, Lane.
The UPCI church.
UPCI church. Don't ever join that. If you're listening to me right now, just stay away. If anything, I think you've become a beacon of light to guide people away from that place. So I think if anything, that's good. If you could do that, I think that's good.
Yeah. Just, I don't know. Just keep yourself grounded. That's all I can say. From that perspective, is if I had a moral to say, it would just be keep yourself grounded and reflect on yourself, and that's the best thing you can do.
I didn't mean to cut off your story either. I don't know if you have any more, or like you want to know.
No, I think that's a good place to end. And I guess if the only thing I would add now is like looking back, the only other thing is just like the people that were there. Like there's only one of all the people that I was really involved with that are still in the church.
Yeah.
So
are your friends still there? The friends are like
one of them is.
Okay. Did you talk to the ones that are out?
Yeah, and now they're like totally rebellious and crazy, and the other total side of things, right? So, but yeah, I talked to them.
That's cool. I don't know. That's awesome. So, I've never heard you sing. I didn't know you were on American Idol.
Yeah.
If you had any song lyrics to sing to close out this show, I'm gonna invite you to do that. I'm gonna step like 6 feet, maybe 12 feet away from you, or maybe if you could like point in that direction too.
Step out the show.
I'll close it out, but like just hit me with a couple notes.
I heard there was a secret chord David played and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do ya? It goes like this: the fourth and fifth, a minor fall and a major lift, a baffled king composing hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
To all you listening out there on the internet, hallelujah. Stay safe, and thank you for listening.